loan processing for the payroll protection program, and she'll be sharing her insights on what she's learned. Our next panelist is Conner Weiss, and he's the founder and managing principal advisor of Conner Weiss and Associates. He's also a special advisor on veteran entrepreneurship and civic innovation for the DC Mayor's Office of Veteran Affairs. Connell joined PCV's business advising program in 2018 as well. And he joined looking to pay it forward by sharing his deep knowledge of small business and entrepreneurship. He has a passion for helping disadvantaged and minority-owned businesses and works very closely with the government and the SBA to get funds to the businesses that need it the most. So we're very excited to hear from both of our panelists on the knowledge learned and what they've been experiencing firsthand.
Thank you, Daniel. I want to take a moment also to highlight that both Dr. Conner Weiss and Pamela Lee are joining us in their capacity as PCV business advisors. This is their volunteering efforts. Pamela wanted us to also share that while she works at Bank of the West, she right now is here on her volunteering capacity. This is not, she's not representing right now Bank of the West. She is not speaking on behalf of Bank of the West. And so please don't go on social media and say, Bank of the West said this, that Pamela has been very generous with her time, and she's here in a capacity of a volunteer and not in a way speaking on behalf of any organization other than herself as the volunteer. So thank you so much, Daniel, for those introductions. Thank you so much to our panelists. Let's get started with our questions. Okay. I'm going to turn off my screen so we can see your guys' beautiful faces instead. Oh, we lost Connell on the video.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I didn't want to distract people while I was like rummaging through my back, and now I don't know what's happening with my screen. So let me just work on that.
We got you there. All right. So let's get started with your own introduction. We'd love to hear from you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how are you working with the small business community right now through the COVID-19 crisis and through all of this process of accessing federal funds? I'll have, maybe Pamela, can you go first, please?
Okay, so I've been pretty much everywhere with this response, if you will. Starting from the days when the PPP program was announced, helping my clients attempt to prepare to submit their own applications, riding the whole whirlwind of change after change after change of the SBA PPP guidelines, even up until the day that the doors were theoretically opened. Going through the anguish with them about, who's open really to take apps now. And, being up at all hours of the morning to say, oh, Wells Fargo's open now. So you've got Wells Fargo apps, go now, this kind of thing. So I've been on that aspect. As has been mentioned earlier, I've been actually on the other side, on the financial institution side, helping look at those apps and prepare them for submission to the SBA. I was dreaming one night that the SBA has actually opened up jobs to help process it on their end, but probably not going to go there. That would be covering too many of these things. A couple of my individual clients have actually received SBA funds, yay. And so now I'm also going to be on the side of accounting for those SBA funds in a sufficiently detailed manner so that they can ultimately get forgiveness. So I've been all over the map with it and continuing not only to do that, but to track ongoing news about other resources available for the small business organizations that I service, as well as those that I've come into contact with, because I think, as we all know, the SBA funds, as much as there is a second round and potentially a third round, it's not going to be enough. And the timing of the funds is also in question, and in a lot of cases, and I think we're going to get to this, there's a need for the small business owner to strategize for, what if those funds never come, and not count on them per se. I think you're on mute.
All right, perfect.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Conner Weiss. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist generalist. I'm a business psychologist based here in Washington, D.C., and my company also works in Mauritius, Africa, and Hong Kong as well. Basically, what I do is for the cities, I help them with equitable economic development, not just DC government, but other governments around the world, or on behalf of nonprofit organizations. And what we do is we help manage a micro-lending fund that's SBA guaranteed here in the District of Columbia. We also support the district through its Veteran Business Center, working with veteran entrepreneurs. As myself, I'm a former officer in the United States Coast Guard. I was a platoon junior grade. From working with our Opportunity Youth, 18 to 24-year-olds, where the district actually will pay to help them get incorporated and get a business license. So think of us the best way as like a social worker for entrepreneurs. We specifically work with minority and at-risk entrepreneurs, similar to what Pacific Coast Ventures does, but except we are more on the added, we will be the company that will add an added service to an organization like PCV. Also, what I do is I advise the mayor's office on various other social economic programs, if it's from workforce development, if it's from micro-lending, expanding that, or if it's developing corporate partnerships with bigger organizations or developing entrepreneurial development programs. And then we also do traditional SME consulting work, bookkeeping, hand-holding with entrepreneurs, helping them connect to capital. We're a full-service firm. We're a little bit odd duck, been in the government. I know I look very, very young. I'm Black Filipino, so I'm never going to age. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But been in about 30 years old, been in government for about 11 years. Well, 12 years. I got in government when I was about 17, so don't quote me if I'm a year off or so. And been doing entrepreneurial development work ever since.
Wow.
From the White House to down to local government and state government.
Wow, thank you so much for those introductions. Again, we're so appreciative of your being here and your support for our small business owner community. So let's get started. As an introduction to our conversation, would one of you like to please share what is the difference between the EIDL grants and loans and the PPP program, just to get us started before we dive in?
So, and feel free to reinterpret this, Ms. Lee, any way that you see if I don't get it correctly. But PPP, how I've been describing it to my clients, is basically money that the government is giving to keep workforces afloat while the Corona-19 epidemic is happening. What IDLE is more organizations to receive relief who have been affected by, like for example, District of Columbia is an economic disaster declared zone. It was one of the first in the country. So our businesses can apply because they have been affected under this economic disaster, along with PPP if it was an area that necessarily didn't classify as economic challenge, but they were still affected workforce-wise because of the virus. For example, I have a client who's in a part of Maryland that's not declared an economic disaster zone, and another client who's right over the county lines in PG County, which is declared as economic disaster zone. So they were able to access two different types of funding. But every day the SBA is changing their rules, and then also local governments are also pitching in as well. But I don't know if you would like to add anything, Ms. Lee.
Yeah, I would. The primary difference in my mind is that the PPP is a forgivable loan. If you use it for specific purposes, your payroll, 75% plus of the proceeds going for payroll, rent, utilities, those covered costs, if you will, you don't have to pay the money back. With EIDL, under any circumstances, you're on the hook, and yes, it's a preferred interest rate, but the money still needs to go back to your lender. I believe also that EIDL has a personal guarantee aspect to it, whereas PPP does not. So there's some fundamental difference on the economics of the loan repayment, and to your point on the purposes of the funds usage. The other thing that I'll mention, because Connell, you said something about the disaster zones per se. Within the most recent set of EIDLs, there's a test around your particular loss of revenue to be able to qualify for it. So it's the whole country is a disaster zone at this point, sadly. So, you know, take a look at the SBA's rules. They're fairly clearly set out on the SBA's website itself. And I don't think one needs to actually wait for a formal declaration of the disaster in one's geographic area for that specific set of loans, including the disaster grant, which is the 10K advance.
Yes. So as we all know now, the SBA has put a hold into the applications because the funds unfortunately ran out so quickly. However, we know that the government is in the process of approving part 2. So I would love for you guys to tell us a little bit about what our small business owners should be doing in preparation so that once they can apply again, they're ready to go, specifically for PPP. Yes.
Yeah. So what I would say, and you know, last night the Senate anyway approved their measure of about $310 billion to replenish the fund. But you know, with the speed of government, we still don't know how fast that will still come out. And then with the House also voting for something slightly different, that will be the round 2 as of right now, to my knowledge, and it can have changed in the last couple of hours. As we both said, the government's changing day by day, hour by hour on what they're doing to the response. But some of the same things I told my clients to do for, you know, a normal loan package is putting together a loan package, put together those pertinent documents that you may or may not be asked for, such as your incorporation documents, your articles of organizations, your articles of organization, your business license, your payroll to say who are you paying, how often are they being paid, your regular expenses like rent, any other things that you can technically use this funds for. You want to have as best as financial documents as possible. So if you don't use QuickBooks or have an accountant, I would suggest using one of those if you're not very Excel challenged. I have a lot of clients who still use Excel, which kind of boggles my mind because it's a lot more work. But you know, when I originally went to accounting school, that's how I was taught. But at the same time, I would say if you're trying to apply as soon as possible before funds, you know, run out again, I would definitely try to digitize as much as possible, or reach out to someone who is a certified bookkeeper or CPA or holds equivalent licensure within their jurisdictions.
Yeah. So Pamela, from the perspective of what the application entails and the process itself, is there anything else that anything they can do to be ready to go, you know, beyond putting together as many documentations and getting the financial statements ready? Anything else that you wish people knew to get ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to respond to a couple things that I heard Connell mentioned there. One, and this I think also applies to some of the chat concerns, if you've already applied and did not get anything out of round 1, you have a couple of choices. You can stay where you are because the bank or other financial institution that you have originally applied for still has your information. You don't need to resubmit it to get back in line. In fact, that might hurt you because your bank might get confused. And I know when I've been doing some processing here that the minute we hit a duplicate submission, again, at the same financial institution, we have to sort of halt, sort it out, you know, are the two the same, So I would say, you know, don't resubmit again to the same financial institution. Many people say, you know, go and apply in several places. That has some merits to it. If you do get if you get funding through Bank 5 of the 5 that you've applied to, let us say, you know, please do yourself the favor of telling banks 1 through 4 that you have in fact received funds, because the SBA will be looking for reapplications, and I don't know what they're going to do if they find your TIN again, but you're only allowed 1 of those loans. And for sure, you don't want to be in the media for anything inadvertent like, you know, so-and-so got 3 of these loans and how did that happen? And, you know, all of the social media uproar around that. And we've seen, you know, Shake Shack and so forth kind of step up to give funds back because of the social media uproar about restaurant franchises getting millions and millions and millions. So that's one. There was a comment, sorry. So if you're already in somebody's queue, then don't resubmit there. If you think that somebody else has a faster queue, know that you're going to be at the back of the line for that other place if you're resubmitting or submitting for the first time now, because with all the furor around particularly Wells Fargo, Chase, where they're, what I had heard was that they're getting sued over not processing first in, first out. You know, all the other banks that I'm aware of are being very scrupulous about, you know, if you applied on April the 4th, which was the first day that the SBA window was open, you know, really working those apps, trying to get any missing documentation, I'll come back to documentation in a second, that they might need, and really pounding on those apps to get them through as a priority over applications that came on April 6th, 7th, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So in terms of documentation, what I have seen in a lot of cases is that somebody was so excited about filing their SBA application that they might have missed a letter in their email address. And so they're not getting their updates, they're not getting the request for additional information. If you think that's you, it's going to be very tough to get back to somebody at the bank to respond to you, because everybody is pumping ahead to try to get as many clean apps through as possible. But try anyway, you know, to submit to whoever the original email address was or channel that it was that you applied through.
Oh, Pamela, you're accidentally on mute.
Let's try this.
There we go. You're good now.
Okay. So I was talking about how there might be some inadvertent email addresses. I've seen instances where somebody legitimately has 2 email addresses and one has a full mailbox, and the bank doesn't know about the other one because it's a personal email address. So, you know, be cognizant of who you named as the primary contact and the email address connected to that primary contact, because in this day and age with, you know, the shelter in place, et cetera, email is going to be the way that people will be attempting to contact you. So look at your spam, look at whether your email box is full, because I've run into those. And, you know, do whatever you can to make sure you are looking everywhere for any request from the lender or lenders that you are working with.
And quadruple check before you submit that you put in the right email address.
That would be helpful too.
Yes.
Now let's say that you are getting a request for documents, because in many cases, particularly the early websites where they were just trying to grab as many applications as possible to get the process started, they took the basic app and not the supporting documentation. So what you want to do now in preparation, if you've not already been asked for that supporting documentation, is to pull it together. And what you need to pull together varies depending on what kind of legal entity you are. I'll go after the edge case first because they are at the back end, independent contractors and sole props. You know, what do you do? Because you don't have W-2s, you don't have 941s, you don't have a normal payroll per se. What the SBA guidelines say and what I've seen requested are 2 things. One of which is an interesting gotcha. The interesting gotcha is the Schedule C for 2019. Now, we all know that the 1040 filing deadline has been pushed off from April to July. And so many of us, because we were just trying to keep our businesses together, sort of pushed off the personal 1040 tasks. So the guidelines say that even if you have not filed yet, you can still give your lender a filled in 1040 Schedule C. So if you haven't already and you're an independent contractor, sole prop, put one of those things together. Because the net income that is shown on that form divided by 12 gets you to your average monthly payroll figure, which is one of the two, dollar numbers on the PPP form. Okay.
That's the calculation you have to make sure you know how to, that you've gotten before you start your application process. So that's one of the things that people can start doing as we get ready for the round 2 of.
Yes, and if you are not a sole prop independent contractor, then the other things that people will need sort of divide itself between 2 sets of documents. So Connell, for example, mentioned getting your articles of incorporation, bylaws, etc. together. That applies really only if you are applying with a lender who is not your primary bank. So let us say that you bank with Wells Fargo and you applied to Wells Fargo and you also applied to Bank ABC, who is not your normal bank, but they were open and accepting of non-customer applicants. Okay. Wells Fargo will not need, nor should they be asking for your articles of incorporation, yada, yada, because you are already their customer. They know you. Right? So it's the KYC, as we call it in the business, stuff that you do not need to go through with, in my example, Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Bank ABC, however, does need to do some due diligence. Are you who you say you are? And so for that, you will need to dredge up all of that information to prove that, yes, the company exists. It's in good standing with the state wherever it was incorporated. They're going to need some information about you as a person, including photo ID and that. And you're going to go through more rigmarole. So aside from the identity information, again, which if you're going through your bank should not come up, you're going to need to have the information that you access to put together your calculation of the average monthly payroll, which will generally mean payroll documents. Many of the large payroll processors have put together specific reports to help you. We love seeing that on the processing side. You're also being able to add in the health insurance premiums and retirement contributions that the employer has paid, so documentation around that.
I think this is a good segue for one of our audience questions. We have Ruth Flores asking, my bank was still working on its interface with SBA for the PPP, and they ran out of funding before it finished. She asked, should I access the second round of funding through another larger venue, like our merchant services provider who has offered, instead of risking that the bank cannot deliver again?
You know, I've seen Square, for example, has stepped up to doing something like this, and that might well be for merchant services provider. So it's much like the scenario that I mentioned earlier. If you think that you are far enough back in the line where you're not going to make it to the front of the line with your first provider, I mean, they still have your app, so you certainly do not need to reapply there, then yeah, you can roll that dice and go with the other one. Certainly there's no guarantees because the amount of money that's been theoretically authorized in this round, second round here, will still not be enough to cover everybody who wants funds. And it's going to be a game, right? Because every financial institution that is SBA authorized has taken the roughly week, 2 weeks to generate a mammoth backlog of applications ready to be pushed through E-Tran to SBA, and it's going to be this mad rush. I don't know how the SBA is going to handle it. I mean, they've said first in, first out, but I would almost want to be in Vegas and bet how many times their website's going to crash, you know, and the funds are going to run out, if anything, faster than the first time, I think. So it's, there's no guarantees in this. And again, any business owner who's worth their managerial expertise should not count on getting the funds. If they get the funds, great. But there's enough of an overwhelming demand for the funds that they should not, you know, bank everything on it.
Yeah. Actually, touching upon that, we're going to share in the end a collection of a few grant opportunities that are non-federal, not related to the government, that are open now for small businesses, but we'll put a pin on that until the end. And Connell, you were going to say?
Yeah, and I was also going to say I'm going to share some opportunities as well, because also people have to keep, like Facebook, they're doing stuff. Verizon did something earlier this month. Facebook's application for the United States just opened later, and I'll share this with you guys too. But also a couple of nonprofit organizations that fund, you know, people who are in the arts and music and food, industry specific as well, some national associations. But as also I tell a lot of people, also look at your county, state, and the local government, because they're also doing it. So for example, in DC, the mayor put about $25 million into our grant program to give out as grants to businesses. So they're not even asking for it. For the money back, but we also put some money into our micro lending program to push out to our CDFIs, which are also organizations, community development financial institutions, that you should also look at in your community. They can sometimes either be independent CDFIs, CDFI banks, or micro lending institutions, which is a little bit different from a traditional CDFI. But also look at those programs as well, but you'll still want some of the same documents that we mentioned before for those other opportunities. So that's why I was saying still put together like a loan package, because you can also go after these private loans, sort of, for example, through organizations that we work with. For example, we know PayPal is doing their own application for PPP and their workforce working capital program. Blue Vine Capital just recently opened up their own bank, and they're doing their own programs, but they also do invoice financing, or just a number of other people. You don't have to pick anyone, but do your due diligence too. Just don't go with anyone who you think is just because they're small, your application or your likelihood is to get approved for funding, because there are some predatory lending organizations out there that will try to take advantage. We personally do not I do not recommend any organization either I haven't used in my past or are not a part of our trusted lenders network. And then there's the last one I would say for veteran entrepreneurs, there's Street Shares, which is specifically a veteran lending institution that primarily only works with veterans or businesses that support veterans as a part of their mission.
Yeah, it's such an important point. And I want to move to a separate question that I think applies to a lot of our small business owners. So Bill Pace is asking, what are some of the specific challenges facing sole proprietors and independent contractors in applying for PPP and disaster funding? I know there's a difference between sole proprietors and independent contractors. So I would love if one of you could clarify what are some of the specifics around these cases.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Ms. Lee go more into detail for it, but I will tell you about at least the independent contractor route, because I was an independent contractor that became an LLC, and my company is a government contracting firm. So I would say a lot of the things that I've seen for customers who come through our micro lending program, or some of the other programs that we sit on, is that one, they don't have their documents together. They have no accounting data to give because they're using their personal bank account as their business bank account. And that's one of those big no-nos that you really don't want to do, even if you're independent. Personally, for me, for tax reasons, but also for situations just like this, where you're trying to now separate the money you may make from your day job from the money you make from a government contract or another independent contracting. Because everybody in DC has a company. I'm gonna be honest. Everybody in DC is a government contractor and they own their own business. So I see it a lot more than you would think, or people will sort of start to treat their business bank account as their bank account. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I've seen, or their corporate documentation is not up to date because they don't follow refiling with their state or doing their annual reports. So I would say those are the two biggest things that I've seen. And then the last one is someone trying to fill out paperwork and they don't understand it. So having someone that can kind of understand the paperwork or relook over something before you hit submit. Because I've seen some of the most interesting things from other people who have DR in front of their names in MBAs, but they don't maybe know how to fill out paperwork. So I would say always don't think you're a lawyer or don't think you're an accountant. Don't just go with your friend because he took one law or accounting class in college and says he can, and he does his own taxes on TurboTax. You should probably look for somebody like a part of this network or somebody like me or Ms. Lee who actually have been doing this for a couple of years and are insured and licensed and all that jazz, because same thing with your taxes. You just don't want anyone to do it just because they've done their taxes.
Yeah, I definitely second that. As an MBA who cannot fill out one of these applications, I definitely agree. Following up on that question, we have Ruth Flores who's saying that she's a single member LLC. So sometimes they tell us that she counts as a sole proprietor and sometimes not. So she's wondering how would this play within the PPP applications? So kind of part of the same question. So I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't experienced it as a single member LLC, but that's just me. I haven't experienced it. It's interesting if someone tells you that you should be counted as a sole prop, whereas from my knowledge, it's more of what you classify as through your tax returns, but also, yeah, I don't think you should get it. Someone should tell you that. Just in my standpoint, Ms. Lee has been doing it a lot longer than I have, so she may know differently. But on all the applications that I've processed, we haven't gotten that question.
So let me make sure that I read it here. In terms of the question around the single member LLC, because to your point, when they file their 1040, they're using a Schedule C. And in that regard, then the paperwork that the lender is looking for is a lot like a sole prop, i.e. they're going to be looking for that 1040 Schedule C and the 1099s as well, to the extent that she has any to back up the gross revenue piece of it. Hope that helps.
Great. Appreciate it. So let's move on to a different question. Before we move into other resources, a little bit more on the SBA disaster loans. George Arvan asked, I have applied to SBA disaster loan assistance and have an application number, and I was told to expect to be contacted back in a week. I haven't heard back from them. What would you suggest that I do?
So the application number, I assume, is from the bank, the financial institution, as opposed to the SBA itself. I would contact them.
Contact the bank.
Everybody's backlogged right now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even Wells Fargo, they put a statement on some of the emails that have come back to one of my clients about their PPP loans, where they've said that they've drawn in people from around the bank to process the mammoth backlog that they have. And these are people who don't know about lending. They might have been dealing in the branch. They might be back office people who've been doing, something else, and they're having to train all these folks and push them through. So getting an application means that you're in queue, yay. Does not mean anything in terms of the completeness of the application in the lender's eyes, or readiness, more to the point, to be pushed through to SBA. So if Bill has a way of contacting their lender, their potential lender, he should probably do that. And again, like we said earlier, make sure you look in your spam, your junk, make sure that all of your email boxes are ready to accept emails that might come from an unfamiliar place, but should come from the right domain for sure. And just be on the lookout for additional communications there.
Got it. So it's related a little bit to what Robert Unger was asking, if lenders are confirming receipt of the PPP application, so business owners can be assured that they are in the queue. And I think for this, it depends on the lender, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah. Most of them, I think, are doing a good job of realizing that if they don't say something, their contact centers are getting overwhelmed because people are calling, even though the contact centers don't have information, sadly, about it. So yeah, try email or whatever channel you used to originally contact that particular lender, and be, looking for those unexpected emails from those lenders.
And I would definitely second, even if you're talking to them on the phone, I would suggest using email, because like she said, a lot of the call centers are backed up, but also the email, it seems like for my clients and for myself, when we're emailing, we're getting a faster response than when we go on the phone because of those high call volumes, and it's going to the correct person they can forward it to the correct person who can maybe answer, because sometimes some of those departments don't have a direct phone number for outside people to contact.
Yeah.
So I would say, and you always want a paper trail too, because it's better when they respond back, because you can say, oh, you told me this, this, and this. That's another government contracting thing that even when we talk to you on the phone, we'll always recap with an email to you, either from the government side when I used to do that, or the public side. It's more for us for a paper trail. If you ever wondered why is this person emailing? We just talked about this.
Yeah.
Those tactics.
So actually, we have Roya and an anonymous attendee and George who are saying that they apply through the SBA portal. So they don't have any specific bank mentioned. So they have nowhere to check back. And that's where they get the application number actually from the SBA. And they get this 1 week message, but nothing. So there's no lender involved. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between applying through the SBA portal versus the PPP process through a lender?
Yeah, so I at least for what I've done, that was more of the early times when people when they first put up the website, they were taking applications online like Ms. Lee was mentioning, and they were really kind of just putting it up there to capture people applying, but they took it down, about 3 weeks later, Ms. Lee? But it's really, I would say, personally, I've been putting a lot of my clients through private organizations like the bank, like other companies that I mentioned, just because I've seen a faster response through that way than I have through the website. Because one of my clients, I got contacted through the SBA website, and this is just particularly, this person may be different than they were told to actually go process through a local lender that the SBA had given money to here in the district to push out funds. I work with it on that side because I work with it more on the micro lender side, and we already have certain dollars given to us from the local government or from the federal government. So it might be different than people who are applying through banks. So I don't want to speak out of turn when it comes to applying via the bank. I'm just going from the micro lender side. This is what we have gone through. So
would it be worth for them to consider maybe reapplying through a lender? I see a lot of nodding. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I said. I would definitely go through a private lender. Like Ms. Lee mentioned before, you can do 2, 3, or 4. I wouldn't do more than 4, not to over inundate yourself. But the reason why I say 2, 3 is because I did 1 through SBA, 1 through my bank, which is Wells Fargo, and then 1 through our backup bank / regular financer. And they're not endorsing anyone, just using it in general, Blue Vine Capital, which has now put a message on their website saying they have super high call volumes. But because they already specifically only do lending, so they have a lot more money to push out than my bank, which, is doing a bunch of other things, but it's a national bank. Blue Vine is smaller, but also trying smaller institutions too, smaller financial institutions, regional financial institutions, just because they also have a smaller footprint, but they may also be using some of their own private dollars to fund some of these programs as well.
So people should be kind of balancing, weighing in, maybe going through their existing bank where they already are registered, they don't have to do the paperwork, show all the stuff, and maybe going through a new one that may have a shorter queue and less volume. So that's
it's still at 50-50, but it's sort of like my mom always used to tell me, you want to have a bank and a credit union because they can kind of bid against each other. That's how I think of it in my way. But I will also say, still looking at micro lending institutions and SBA certified micro lending institutions. Let me push that back out there. And CDFIs, certified CDFIs.
Yeah.
Because there are organizations that exist out there to receive dollars, but these ones specifically have a separate pot of money to loan out to businesses throughout the year. And they're already also supposed to work with people who may not be eligible for traditional bank loans yet. Typically CDFIs or micro lenders, we want you to come to us because we want to build you up so you can get to a point where you can then go to a traditional credit union or a bank. And
one thing I would love to Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, it's okay. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm right. So one thing that I do want to add is that yesterday we participated on a webinar call with the SBA, and one thing that they are doing is that they're fast tracking the approval process for new lenders to be able to deploy these funds. So you may want to continue checking the website to see if there are more options of available lenders that could be approved to process these loans. So it's an organization that wasn't approved 3 weeks ago when you first started, maybe approved now, maybe you're a customer of them already. So you may want to continually check that. I have a question from Jackie Wright, who said news reports and Black organizations reveal that minority businesses have been shut out of crisis federal funding. What is being done to ensure minority businesses, which include women businesses, will receive money in the next round of funding?
Well, what I would say, there was a report done about 2 years ago in conjunction with NCRC, the National Community Resilience Corporation, which basically said that ultimately minority business owners are historically discriminated against in funding due to a lot of algorithms and other approval processing, but a lot of institutions have striven to create committees that oversee their lending practices and look over reports to make sure if you feel like you were a victim of discriminatory approval, you can either reach out to the legal department of that financial institution or with the SBA's Office of the Inspector General. But for the most part, I know I don't think they ask any racial data on the applications.
On the PPP, they do not.
Yeah, they do not. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. I know a lot of loan applications try to stay as much as possible away from getting that type of data, so it is not discriminatory, but that does not guarantee, like if you go through a private institution, that if they do that and you feel that the application is discriminatory, I would report that to either the SBA or your state Inspector General office.
Yeah, I'm going to add on there that in the round 2 of the PPP program, there is a certain amount of money that is being set aside for smaller community banks, and thus they obviously can't target individual loan applications because the loan apps do not have the demographic information. But they are targeting smaller community banks with a carve-out of the overall bundle of money, and I was trying to use the internet to get to the exact dollar amount, and I can't right now, but I'm sure it's in several news reports, and it's, you know, a few $1 billion to try to, again, no guarantees, right? Because even if they set aside however many billion, given the overwhelming demand, not everybody's going to get their application approved and funded. But, you know, so to the extent that they can, they're trying to target the part of the application pool that might have been disadvantaged because perhaps the community bank, although SBA approved, wasn't up to dealing with this mammoth rush of applications and the ever-changing application guidelines in order to get everything through.
Yes, and I think this is what I was mentioning before about the SBA fast tracking the approval certification process to some of the smaller community lenders is part of that effort as well, to try to get the loans and make them more available to the wider range of our community instead of, you know, bigger clients and then bigger banks, which, you know, it's an unfortunate effect of.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously several things being balanced here,
Exactly.
and I would not want to be the person who's trying to be Mr. or Ms. Popular, because, you know, someone's going to say something.
Yes, yes. Okay, more questions from our community. Is wrapping up on the sole proprietor questions. If a sole proprietor has a loss in the most recent tax filing, does that automatically disqualify them from any PPP funding?
I would not say that, but I think that you're going to need to have a conversation with your lender. If you can substantiate your gross revenue with 1099s and such, they may say, fine. Connell, do you have an insight on that one?
I'm sorry, my computer had cut out for a second, so so I'm totally lost what the question was. I'm sorry.
The question is, if a sole proprietor had a loss in 2019, could they still be eligible for a PPP loan?
One of my clients had a loss, but it wasn't a significant loss, but they did have a loss that accounted for about 15% of their sales, and they were still able to get some money. So again, like I said, but they came through us as through our micro lending program through SBA. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure if, because we are also a micro lender, if the SBA, because it's higher above me, made some exception for them. But I do know one thing that we found out, that some of our clients who had a loss but were also SBA, already had an SBA guaranteed loan. So technically our loans are already SBA guaranteed. They weren't able to double dip, but what the SBA did do is gave them debt relief for up to 6 months worth of their payments. So their loan actually zeroed out with us, and we were able to give them a new loan. So I don't.
But not through PPP.
But not through PPP. It was
Not through PPP.
Yeah, it was directly to us. But that was one of the ways that they were able to get around that, because of them already having a guaranteed loan. So if you already have a business loan out too, I would also tell you double check into that to make sure it was not SBA guaranteed, because technically you can't get both. But you can get that relief program if it is SBA backed.
That's a great point, which I think is a good segue for my next question. What are some alternative resources that people should know about? I'm going to share my screen and go into a list we have as a maybe get us started. I'm sharing my screen now. 1 second. Oh my goodness. Okay. Share. Oh, no, this is not what I meant. Sorry. Here. Resources. Sorry, that was too small. There we go. So
I thought it was just me. I was like, that's super tiny. I can't see. I lost my. I broke my glasses yesterday. So I've been doing this whole thing. If you've seen my eyes, they've been like. So
don't worry. So I wanted to highlight. We're going to share this presentation with everyone who attended. So you have a list of links. I wanted to point you to, first and foremost, the PCV Small Business Resource Guide for COVID-19 resilience. We call it Small Business Resilience. We are collecting and curating all of the resources that we come across and vet, and we're including a lot of alternative funding options, and some are national, some are by state, some are regional. So I would direct everyone here first to a PCV guide, and I would love to hear any other resources that Pamela or Connell want to share. We can add them later to the email that we sent back to everyone. But what are some other resources that folks should be considering right now, in addition to federal funding?
So I think Connell said it best earlier, where he said, look to your local governments, be it at the state level, be it at the city level. I know in San Francisco, both levels have offered some amount of either low-cost loans or grants, just out and out, grants. Again, and there's criteria that are related to it. So in San Francisco, my home city, there is a grant program for truly small businesses, those with 5 employees or less, as opposed to PPP, which is looking at 500 employees or less. The last link on what you are showing there is in fact something that I sent to you just like yesterday or the day before.
Yes,
and that is a fabulous resource because it is being crowdsourced by lots of people, including people at Gusto, the payroll processor, and they've accumulated resources that are from the federal governments, from the state governments, and from private, i.e. like Facebook and Salesforce, and put them onto 2 tabs of a Google Sheet that is, again, continuously updated. The last update that I saw was this morning because people are contributing what they know about it. And it's very well organized, and it has live links so that you can see the eligibility criteria for it. So that's what I would do there. In addition to that, cash is king right now. Preserving cash and making sure that your cash flow is intact to the extent possible. So outside of all of that, look at where your major expenses are. If your major expense is the rent or the mortgage, talk to your mortgage, or talk to the people that you are paying your rent to, and see if you can work something out as well. So don't stay here with, what are people going to give me money for, essentially, but work with your specific financial circumstances to see what you can do to reduce the amount of money that you have to pay out. And on the other side, increase the money that you're taking in. And that's going to vary by, again, your specific business. But look at your accounts receivable. Are there people there that you need to remind? Like, I'm in business, I'm still trying to keep jobs around for my 10 people or whatever. Do you need to pivot? Like, I've seen a lot of restaurants who used to be sit downs only. Now they're doing takeout, and they're not getting rich, but they're keeping their employees employed. Does your state have a work share program where you can pay your employees less and the state picks up the other? And again, your employees are staying employed. So there's a lot of things to do, and a lot of it's going to be very specific to your business.
I want to add to what Pamela was saying, in that if you can find any way to continue generating revenue, even if it's a little, by offering online sales or gift card sales or curb pickup, that can be super important because it brings on some cash, but also it makes you eligible to more grants. If you can say, I'm still generating some revenue, because there are some grants that are going to make you, they're going to not consider you if your revenue generation is stopped. So that's super important. And make sure you take your PCV business advisor into account. They can help you brainstorm how are some ways that you can keep the doors open while you can't open the doors.
Yes, and I definitely agree with that. So I was going to actually talk about that after Ms. Lee mentioned pivoting, is that organizations like mine, because we're unique, we don't just do business consulting. So we already had multiple other realms of revenue, but we're also a job creator in the district. So for example, people who live in DC, Maryland, Virginia, or West Virginia, we're hiring them to deliver, because we had gotten a subcontract from bigger companies such as Amazon and LaserShip to actually deliver packages. And I have people who are coming from the trucking industry, from construction industry, from being bookkeepers to web designers who are having 4-door SUVs or minivans and delivering these packages to make additional money. We have people who are picking up online work through Fiverr and Upwork. People who are switching from build. One company was a vape company, believe it or not, and now they're making masks. So, which is a little bit ironic, but different companies are finding different ways to make money. So I would say be wary on all opportunities. Like I said, I'm always free if you want me to vet a company for you here in the US or internationally and help you go through that through the platform. But also, don't throw all your eggs in one basket either. Don't just because you had a friend who called you and said they have access to masks, let's sell masks and we can get money from the federal government, then you spent $5,000 and you realize you have the wrong category of masks, because there's 3 different categories, right? So again, whatever you pivot to, try to get somebody else's opinion before you fully just do it. Either if it's a friend, if it's one of us through the PCV network, or if it's through your local SBA SCORE or state equivalent thereof's office that helps out with small business technical assistance.
Perfect.
And also one last program. States have also been authorized under the CARE Act to offer UAP, which is unemployment insurance for self-employed and independent contractors. I don't know if every state's gotten it up and running yet. I know the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, have already gotten their programs up this week or are coming up today. Checking your state, ask your unemployment office if you are eligible for that level of unemployment. Some cities have authorized it on their own separately from the state or federal unemployment funds, but also ask for other assistance programs outside of business, because I know some programs, like here in the district, we're supporting self-employed and low-income people, providing them with extra resources, like if they have children, allowing them to get child assistance funds to help pay for funds for things for the kids. They just give you $500 to $1,000 depending on your household size. It's not a lot, but it's something additional in your pocket to be able to support the bills. Through food programs where they're helping you buy groceries or giving you food. These are not handouts. These are grants. They know that everybody is going to go through it. Trust me, I don't mind saying, like last year I made $90,000, but I still was able to get qualified for a program because last year I was telling our host and Miss Lee that I just recently adopted, right? So I have two new kids that I didn't take into, not barriers, that's not good. 2 new mouths to feed that I didn't have last year. So me making $90,000 in DC as a independent person is great. But with 2 kids, DC has one of the highest costs of living. I'm not outside of California and New York, and that I would never have thought I would be eligible for that type of assistance. So don't be humble. Take what's out there. There's tons of other programs. Trust me, I never thought I would be eligible for some public assistance, and I'm a psychologist, but it came in handy, and I was grateful for it because that was $1,000 that I now had to spend outside of my business or myself, which is very tight right now, which means I wouldn't have been able to pay something else potentially.
Thank you so much for all those tips. I want to take a second. We're out of time, but super quickly, just here's another link for our small business support group that we started. It's on Facebook. It's moderated by a wonderful team here at PCV. And we know entrepreneurship can be a lonely place. So this is a place for you to find community, share concerns, share learnings, celebrate victories, vent, just commiserate, anything at all, and just come and join us. We're here for you. Also, don't forget about your business advisor. If you're not matched right now, contact one of your experienced managers. We're all available for you. Let us know so we can match you to a fantastic advisor like Pamela and Connell. And so before we log off, I just want to take a minute one more time to thank you so much for doing this. We know you're super, super busy. So having you here to answer all of our questions has been priceless. Thank you so much for everything you do for our community. Thank you to any other advisors that may be listening in. And thank you so much for our community of small businesses. You are the fabric of our community. Hang in there. We're all here for you. We're in it together, and we're going to rebuild stronger. So thank you so much. I hope to see you in our online community. And hang in there and stay safe, please. And thank you so much to our panelists once again. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Connell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Thanks so much. Bye.